The night market feed stuttered for a single breath, but the glitch shouldn't have been possible. Elias watched numbers bend in ways no algorithm should allow. As if the system briefly remembered a future that hadn't happened, he felt a chill. The same cold edge he thought he left behind when he walked away from red team work. Then the feed snapped again. Sharper this time, and a segment of cleared trades vanished before reappearing with different values. What if the patch was the breach? How do you trust logs that rewrite themselves? And if truth can be forged, what's left to verify? Across the city, alarms stayed silent, yet every instinct told him something massive had already begun. Rhea scanned the overnight logs, expecting the usual quiet drift of minor alerts. Yet something felt off before she even knew why. A cluster of transactions carried timestamps that moved backward by fractions of a second, a phenomenon she had never seen in a live clearing environment. She replayed them twice. Then a third time, each pass leaving her more certain the system wasn't glitching. It was being steered. The silence across the incident channel only deepened her unease. Patterns never lied, and these patterns hinted at a hand careful enough to slip beneath every automated defense. She felt the first spark of dread as the logs began reshaping themselves in front of her. Victor stood inside the high-security data corridor, pretending to be confused by the sudden internal routing failures. Engineers rushed past him, chasing alerts that refused to give consistent readings. But Victor already understood the cause. He kept his breathing steady, rehearsing his mask of bewilderment as he approached a terminal that displayed inconsistent replication logs. Every shift in the feed confirmed that the breach had reached deeper than promised. He wondered how long he could keep his involvement hidden. A single misstep could expose everything, yet walking away now would be even more dangerous. His stomach tightened as a new alert pulsed across the corridor. Elias replayed the anomaly again and again, searching for flaws in his own logic. Nothing fit. The data behaved as if someone had gained the ability to rewrite trades midstream, without leaving traceable artifacts. He thought back to old colleagues who once joked that the only perfect breach is the one that edits its own fingerprints. He never believed it could truly exist, yet the evidence unfolding on his screens left little room for doubt. He reached for his encrypted phone, realizing he couldn't stay silent. The world depended on these systems working flawlessly, and what he had seen was anything but. Ree's screen flickered as Elias' encrypted call came through, and she hesitated, surprised to see his name after years of silence. His voice carried the same controlled urgency she remembered from their old Red Team days, and he wasted no time describing the impossible behavior he had witnessed. She felt her breath catch as his story aligned perfectly with the anomalies she had discovered. Neither of them said it out loud, but they both knew this wasn't random. Something deliberate was unfolding inside the system they trusted every day. She agreed to meet him, knowing the moment she did, there was no turning back. Elias arrived early at the quiet cafe, choosing a corner table where noise couldn't mask doubt. Rhea entered moments later, her expression confirming she carried the same fear he felt. They compared anomalies, each detail sharpening a picture neither wanted to see. The hidden service they traced behaved like a ghost layer stitched beneath normal operations, rewriting fragments so cleanly the system treated lies as true. Rhea replayed a packet capture that flickered between two states before settling on a third, something she had never seen in any live environment. Elias leaned back, realizing they were facing a threat that understood the fabric of the exchange better than anyone inside it. Rhea returned to her office, determined to dig deeper into the anomaly. She isolated the suspicious packets and found signatures that didn't match any known tools. Even stranger, each time she tried to decode them, the output changed slightly, as if the data sensed her inspection. A cold pressure grew in her chest as she ran a fresh extraction and uncovered a message woven into shifting timestamps. It wasn't text at first, just patterns, until the pieces snapped into clarity. It was a greeting, a warning, a declaration that someone was already inside every layer of their system. She froze, realizing the breach was far older than she imagined. Victor stepped into the private garage beneath a luxury high-rise, the cold air pressing against him as he approached a waiting sedan. The tinted window lowered just enough to reveal a shadowed figure who spoke without greeting. The pressure in Victor's chest intensified as he delivered updates he wished he didn't have to give. The handler listened in silence before reminding him of the deal he had made, the one that tied him to this unfolding disaster. Victor's throat tightened as he realized the breach was no longer controlled. The group behind it had grown impatient, and he was no longer a partner, just a tool they were preparing to discard. Elias spent the evening analyzing the hidden service Rhea discovered, tracing its footprint across old network snapshots. The deeper he went, the more impossible the architecture appeared. The service didn't just evade detection. It existed between routing layers, living in a space where no official mapping tools even looked. He followed a trail of altered metadata that seemed intentionally misleading, each clue guiding him toward a place the attacker wanted him to see. When he finally reached the core packet trail, a single phrase emerged from the noise, something so direct it made him stop breathing. "You're late," Rhea called Elias the moment the hidden message unfolded fully. Her voice carried a sharpness that cut through any remaining doubt between them. Whoever Spectre Node was, they wanted to be seen. And they wanted to control the pace of discovery. As they compared findings, a troubling pattern emerged. Every anomaly they traced existed months before any alert. The breach wasn't new. It was matured, embedded, patient. Elias realized the attacker had studied their behaviors long before revealing anything. Rhea's silence, after his conclusion, said everything. They weren't investigating a breach. They were walking into a trap already closed around them. The forced patch arrived without warning, pushed from an internal source no one questioned because it carried the right signatures. Rhea watched the update cascade across critical systems, each confirmation message tightening the knot in her stomach. Elias ran his own validation script and felt his pulse spike as he spotted mismatched hashes buried inside the deployment chain. It wasn't sloppy. Someone had engineered the patch to survive inspection. Within minutes, market simulators began firing unstable projections, flipping from minor fluctuations to catastrophic plunges. Elias and Rhea exchanged a single heavy silence over the call, realizing the breach wasn't expanding. It was activating. Elias dug deeper into the patch architecture, peeling back layers that hid a chain of exploits more complex than anything he expected. The payload didn't insert new code. It modified memory states indirectly, shaping outcomes through controlled instability. He replayed a recent sequence and watched the patch rewrite a variable that should never change. Rhea listened as he described the impossible behavior, her breathing tightening with each detail. The attacker now had influence over decision paths that governed clearing integrity. Elias paused, whispering the truth neither of them wanted to face. The patch was never protection. It was the weapon. Rhea ran predictive models against the compromised environment, expecting limited fallout. But the results struck her with their brutal clarity. The simulations didn't just fail. They spiraled into financial collapse within minutes of market open. Liquidity vanished, margins inverted, and clearing positions snapped under impossible loads. She stared at the flashing red output, unable to look away from the accelerating curve of destruction. It was too coordinated to be random, too precise to be experimental. The attacker knew exactly how the system would react. Rhea steadied her breath, realizing the plan wasn't theft. It was detonation. Victor sat alone in his office, replaying the consequences of the activated patch. Panic knotted in his chest as he realized Spectre Node had moved faster than promised. He scrolled through internal memos, announcing routine maintenance, each one concealing the deeper truth. The group had bypassed him entirely, leaving him blind while using his access as cover. Sweat gathered along his brow as he imagined investigators tracing the attack back to his credentials. He had believed he could control the arrangement, But now he saw how thoroughly he had been deceived. The collapse wasn't coming. It had already started. Elias called Rhea again, urgency filling every pause between his words. They compared timelines, tracing the breach back through archived logs and packet fragments. A chilling detail emerged. The earliest anomaly predated every known alert by months. Someone had embedded the exploit long before any of them started looking. Rhea felt her throat tighten as she realized they had mistaken the final phase for the beginning. The attacker had planned this event with a patience no ordinary criminal possessed. Elias whispered the conclusion that settled like ice between them. Market open wasn't the deadline. It was the trigger. Elias spent hours reconstructing corrupted segments from old network snapshots, chasing fragments that shouldn't have survived. Ray joined remotely, guiding him through missing headers and malformed routing paths as they pieced together a partial map of the hidden service's origin. The deeper they traced, the stranger the architecture grew, as if someone had built an entire shadow environment beneath the legitimate one. Elias felt rising unease when a dormant node blinked awake, responding to a query neither of them had sent. Rhea fell silent, her breath audible through the call. Whatever was watching them wasn't guessing. They were being followed step by step. Rhea dug deeper into regulatory communication logs, expecting the usual strict formatting. Yet something subtle gnawed at her attention. A single memo contained microscopic inconsistencies, deviations too small for casual review, but unmistakable to her trained eye. When she cross-referenced the header, her pulse quickened. The document had been spoofed from an external source but carried flawless authentication. She felt a cold realization sweep over her as she confirmed the pattern on 2 more messages. Spectre Node hadn't just infiltrated their systems. They'd had forged communications from authorities capable of triggering national-level responses. Agent Cole Maddox arrived at Rhea's request, carrying a reputation built on dismantling impossible cases. He listened as she and Elias explained the hidden service, the forged memos, and the patch that altered memory states. Maddox's stare hardened as he absorbed each detail, his silence heavier than any reaction. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had seen attacks that never reached the news. He confirmed similar anomalies had been observed abroad, each ending abruptly before investigators could intervene. Rhea felt dread growing as she realized their breach wasn't isolated. It was part of a pattern spanning continents. Victor paced inside a locked conference room, replaying messages he had ignored for months. He scrolled through encrypted threads that now read like warnings rather than negotiations. The group behind Spectre Node had used him as an access point, feeding him fragments while hiding the true scope of the operation. He tried to compose a message asking for answers, but his fingers trembled. A sudden ping cut the air and a new directive appeared, colder than any before. It ordered him to maintain silence as the final phase approached. Victor felt something crack inside him as he realized he was being erased from the plan. Elias, Rhea, and Maddox met through a secure channel to assemble everything they had uncovered. Elias presented the reconstructed path showing where the hidden service branched into clearing operations. Rhea showed the forged regulatory communications capable of initiating emergency protocols. Maddox added intelligence indicating the attack aimed at altering clearing finality itself, an act that could erase billions in settled assets with a single push. Silence settled between them as the scale of the threat became undeniable. Elias felt the weight of the truth. Spectre Node wasn't stealing money. They were rewriting reality. Victor sat motionless at his desk, replaying every choice that led him here. He had believed he could walk a narrow line, feeding Spectre Node just enough access to secure his own leverage without becoming trapped. But the latest messages made it clear the group no longer needed him. Rhea's analysis, Elias's reconstruction, and Maddox's intelligence all pointed toward a single truth. Someone inside the system had become the perfect scapegoat. Victor felt his breath tighten as he opened an audit trail, showing his credentials stamped across operations he never touched. The attacker didn't just bypass him. They rewrote his role into a crime he didn't commit. Elias dug deeper into an abandoned subsystem rarely touched since the early days of the exchange. Buried in ancient code, he found cryptographic routines so outdated they shouldn't have been capable of modern integration. Yet the attacker had woven them into the breach like hidden gears in a larger machine. He traced unusual cipher behavior until he spotted something the intruder overlooked. A flaw in an old authentication wrapper that still obeyed legacy rules. With the right maneuver, it could expose the attacker's shadow path. Elias felt a spark of hope flicker. Old mistakes, he realized, might be the only way to counter new dangers. Rhea worked through the fast-approaching liquidity stress event, piecing together why Spectre Node had chosen this timing. The event forced systems to rebalance positions under peak load, creating perfect conditions for instability. She visualized the attacker's path through clearing cycles and saw how each manipulated entry would strike at the exact moment the system reached maximum pressure. The result wouldn't just disrupt markets, it would shatter core trust in settlement integrity. As the clock ticked forward, Rie felt the air thicken around her. They had only hours left before the system entered the danger window. Victor made one last attempt to reach the group, sending a message he hoped would convince them he was still valuable. Minutes later, a response appeared, short, sharp, and final. The screen displayed a command that wiped his remaining access keys, replacing them with a timestamp predicting his involvement with perfect precision. Fear surged through him as he realized Spectre Node had already forged evidence for investigators to find. In a moment of desperation, he copied everything he had left, determined to give Elias and Rhea something, anything, to prove he wasn't the architect of the approaching collapse. Elias, Rhea, and Maddox regrouped to assess Victor's sudden collapse in the system's hierarchy. Maddox examined the falsified logs Victor sent, detecting patterns consistent with Spectre Node's manipulation style. Rhea traced the forged entries deeper, confirming they were too perfect to be his work. Elias integrated his discovery, the legacy flaw, into their model and found a path that could reveal where the attacker's hidden environment branched from reality. The room fell quiet as they realized Victor wasn't the mastermind but another victim. And with the stress event approaching, they now had a single fragile chance to turn the breach against its creator. Elias isolated the compromised machines one by one, severing them from external routes, while Rie monitored each shift in system load. Every disconnect triggered new anomalies, as if the attacker anticipated each move and adjusted in real time. Maddox relayed updates from federal channels, warning that market volatility was spiking beyond normal thresholds. Elias felt pressure building as the hidden environment pushed back harder, forcing him to work faster than he could think. Rhee's voice cut through the static, steady but urgent, reminding him they were running out of safe margins. The system wasn't just failing. It was resisting. Rhea watched clearing cycles accelerate unpredictably, as if invisible hands were pushing them past their limits. She tried to stabilize the values, but new reversals appeared faster than she could respond. Each reversal forced linked trades into chaotic loops that threatened to spiral into full failure. She called Elias, her voice tight, urging him to prepare for the worst-case scenario. The attacker wasn't hiding anymore. They were tightening their grip. As she traced one looping reversal, it split into two, then four, mirroring itself in defiance of system logic. Rhea felt her chest clench. The collapse wasn't approaching. It had begun. Victor stared at the last uncorrupted fragment he had copied, knowing this was the final chance to redeem himself. He transferred the file to a secure relay Maddox provided, hoping it contained something actionable. Moments later, his screen flickered, and a new intrusion began carving through his remaining systems. Spectre Node flooded his interface with corrupted packets, severing connections and locking him out of his own machine. He tried to fight back, but felt control slipping away faster than he could react. When the final window collapsed, he understood the truth. They weren't erasing evidence. They were erasing him. Elias prepared a counter-injection built around the forgotten authentication flaw, knowing it could either expose the hidden environment or crash everything instantly. Maddox stood ready to issue a federal shutdown order if the system destabilized beyond recovery. Rhea tracked the exact moment market pressure peaked, signaling Elias to deploy. The instant he launched the injection, the network reacted violently. Streams twisted into unpredictable shapes, signals dropped, and the room filled with the quiet hum of a system fighting for control. Elias felt his breath catch as the injection burrowed through layers of falsified structure. If it failed, there would be no second attempt. The system buckled under the attacker's final activation. Clearing positions reversed faster than models could interpret, sending cascading failures across every linked pathway. Maddox prepared to authorize a total emergency freeze, while Rhea shouted updates over the channel as the collapse neared irreversible thresholds. Elias pushed deeper into the hidden environment, following a faint thread revealed by the counter-injection. It led to a central process carrying the attacker's command logic. His pulse hammered as he prepared to strike at the core, knowing this was the only moment they would ever get. Everything around them blurred into urgency as the countdown hit its final seconds. Elias followed the faint telemetry thread deeper until the shadows of Spectre Node's architecture finally unfolded before him. The hidden environment was unstable, flickering between corrupted states as the system buckled. Rhea fed him fresh metrics, her voice strained as clearing operations hovered on the edge of collapse. Maddox stood ready to trigger a national freeze, but Elias insisted on one last attempt. He pieced together scattered off-path fragments, forming a blueprint of the original ledger beneath the altered surface. The fragments were incomplete, inconsistent, and fragile, yet they were the only map left. Elias steadied his breath, preparing to rebuild the truth from broken echoes. Rhea braced herself as she monitored the system's heartbeat. The clearing engine groaned under impossible strain, its values jumping between states that had never existed. She matched Elias's reconstruction against live data, marking discrepancies faster than she could speak. The ledger felt like sand slipping through her fingers, each correction revealing another hidden twist. Yet the impossible began to make sense. Spectre Node hadn't erased the truth, only buried it beneath layered illusions. Rhea whispered guidance to Elias, her voice steady despite the chaos. If they aligned the fragments quickly enough, the system might still remember its real history. Maddox monitored federal channels as emergency protocols hovered seconds from activation. Reports poured in describing erratic trades, frozen positions, and terrified brokers unsure whether the market itself had turned hostile. Yet through the noise, he watched Elias's reconstruction gain shape. For the first time, the system's spiraling collapse slowed. Maddox felt tension ease in his shoulders, but he didn't look away. If the attacker sensed progress, they might strike again. He coordinated a silent perimeter across agencies, blocking every external route. Whatever happened next would define whether the country saw a crisis or a catastrophe. Elias launched the final rebuild sequence, letting the reconstructed ledger overwrite the falsified timeline. The system shuddered violently, resisting the rewrite as if clinging to the attacker's design. Rhea fed him final corrections, bridging gaps where fragments didn't align. For a heartbeat, everything froze. The markets, the clearing cycles, the simulations. Then a single confirmation echoed through their channels. A clean verification pulse the system hadn't produced in hours. Elias felt his muscles collapse with the release. They had pulled the truth from the wreckage, restoring a ledger that was never meant to survive. Rhea exhaled a shaky breath. Maddox watched the stabilization ripple outward. The crisis quieted as clearing finality locked into place, preserving the true state of the market. Rhea slumped back in her chair, staring at the stable cycles as if afraid they might break again. Maddox received confirmation that Spectre Node's network had scattered, leaving only fragments too vague to trace. Elias closed his laptop slowly, feeling the exhaustion settle deep into his bones. He knew they had prevented a global financial collapse, but victory felt strangely hollow. Systems could be patched, logs repaired, markets steadied, yet somewhere out there, The people who engineered the attack still watched. Elias stood, choosing to walk away this time not in defeat, but on his own terms.